Thanks to you at home for joining us this hour. I am beginning to resent the word bombshell, but it is the agreed upon metaphor for which we do not have easy substitutions on nights like this. And tonight, in fact, two new bombshells have just dropped. One is from CNN and one is from the New York Times. The New York Times reports tonight, just within the last couple of hours, that the president's campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, has been informed by federal prosecutors that they intend to indict him. Again, the president's campaign manager being told by prosecutors that he will be indicted. We'll have more on that in a second, including a live interview with one of the New York Times reporters who broke that story this evening. But that story broke within minutes of this new report at CNN.com from lead reporter Evan Perez. According to this new report, that same man, Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort, has been extensively wiretapped by law enforcement officials, both before and after last year's presidential election. Now, of course, both of these stories broke at like 7 o'clock tonight, which is, we have had a joke on our show staff for a while now that once you get into like 7 o'clock-ish, it becomes Russia o'clock once it's a weeknight. But Russia o'clock hit tonight with a whole bunch of bells intoning in the distance. I'll tell you what we had been planning to report as the big news in the Russia investigation tonight, before this stuff blew it up. What we thought was going to be the big Russia story tonight was about something called the Kleptocracy Asset Recovery Initiative, which was started by Attorney General Eric Holder during the Obama administration. Last week, President Trump hosted the Prime Minister of Malaysia at the White House. Given all the other things going on in the news last week, it was not the highest profile story in the world. But that visit by the Malaysian Prime Minister was notable in terms of corruption and law enforcement and high public officials finding themselves in the crosshairs of U.S. law enforcement, because that Malaysian Prime Minister is at the center of a gigantic Department of Justice corruption prosecution. The Department of Justice is trying to recover well over $1 billion in assets, everything from movie rights to private jets to apartments to hotels, all things that were purchased with money that was allegedly stolen from the people of Malaysia, from the government of that country. That money was stolen from Malaysia, but it was laundered in the United States by buying stuff in the United States. And the Justice Department has been heavily and aggressively involved in this gigantic corruption case to try to get that stuff back. So President Trump bringing that Prime Minister of Malaysia to the White House while that Prime Minister is in the middle of the gigantic corruption investigation by the U.S. Justice Department, that, of course, was the White House and this president spitting in the eye of the FBI and the Justice Department. But that ends up being important beyond just that insult to American law enforcement, because aside from Malaysia, the other known major target of the FBI's Kleptocracy Asset Recovery Initiative, the other major target other than Malaysia, is Ukraine. And specifically this guy, who is also believed to have looted his country's treasury for his own benefit, and who the FBI has been chasing ever since, trying to figure out where Viktor Yanukovych stashed all of Ukraine's money and where and how he laundered it, and how the stolen money and those assets it's converted to can be recovered and repatriated and given back to the people of Ukraine. That is a major FBI effort under this kleptocracy initiative started by Eric Holder. Paul Manafort, Donald Trump's campaign chairman, was, of course, the senior political advisor to that Ukrainian prime minister during his kleptocratic period, which the FBI has been investigating for years now. And until about 7 o'clock tonight, what seemed like the big news in the Russia investigation is that one of the senior prosecutors who'd been working on that kleptocracy initiative at the Justice Department, on trying to chase all that money stolen from that government, to chase the way it was laundered, to chase the assets that laundered money was used to buy and invest in, one of the prosecutors from that kleptocracy initiative is now reported to have left that job at the kleptocracy thing at the Justice Department to instead start working for Robert Mueller's team, the special counsel investigating Trump and Russia. And if you're Paul Manafort, learning that somebody's left the Ukraine kleptocracy job to start working on the Trump-Russia job, if you're Paul Manafort, that's the kind of news that makes you, like, bump into walls and accidentally tie your shoelaces to each other instead of just tying your shoes. So That was a big deal anyway, in terms of learning that about the character of the Mueller investigation, that they've picked up that prosecutor from that particular part of the Justice Department's work, with its particular history looking at that Ukraine stuff that Manafort was all up in. Well, now this new reporting from CNN not only underscores the importance of that, it takes it to a whole new level of concern, both for Paul Manafort and for the White House. According to the CNN report tonight, Paul Manafort was the subject of a FISA warrant, which is a secret national security court warrant that allowed the FBI to start listening in on Manafort as of 2014. That surveillance, that FISA court order that supported that surveillance, those were based on the Ukraine thing, based on the work that Manafort did in Ukraine for that kleptocratic dictator who he ran campaigns for. So the FBI had him under surveillance starting in 2014, reportedly, because of the stolen assets in Ukraine and the fact that the FBI is working on that story. This kleptocracy money laundering probe, like the one they've got against the Malaysian prime minister, they also had against the deposed Ukrainian dictator that Manafort worked for. That's why they were listening in on him. That also tells you something about how much they already knew about Paul Manafort before Manafort became Trump's campaign chairman, how much they knew about him, his previous work in the former Soviet Union, and his money. Right? They were already deep into Paul Manafort before the campaign started. And that surveillance on him starting in 2014 was obviously totally unrelated to his work on the Trump campaign. Now, according to CNN, at some point last year, that surveillance on the Ukraine stuff stopped, petered out. FBI no longer had the evidence to be able to convince a court that they ought to be able to continue to listen in on Paul Manafort talking about matters involving money that was looted out of Ukraine. So the surveillance at some point in 2016 stopped. But then we also know last year the FBI started a new investigation that you have heard of related to the Russian attack on last year's presidential election to try to influence the election in Donald Trump's favor, and also the FBI's investigation, which started last summer, into whether or not the Trump campaign or Trump associates might have somehow been in cahoots with that Russian attack. Remember the origin story for how that investigation started. Former CIA Director John Brennan testified in Congress this year that last summer, when he was running the CIA, he and the CIA saw something in the course of their spying, in the course of their intelligence collection, that gave them reason to worry that people associated with the Trump campaign might be in league with the Russian government as the Russians were attacking our election. So the CIA last summer saw something that concerned them. That CIA concern led to the creation of an interagency working group to look into those matters. And that is what ultimately led to the FBI counterintelligence investigation into whether or not the Trump campaign colluded with Russia. That is the counterintelligence investigation and now criminal investigation that has today become the Robert Mueller special inquiry. That's how we got here, but it all started last summer. And according to this new report from CNN tonight, sometime after June of last year, so roughly in the same time frame as when the CIA was convening this task force that led to the Russia investigation, sometime after June last year, even though the FBI by that point had stopped surveilling Paul Manafort about the Ukraine stuff, sometime after June last year, the FBI went back to the FISA court again and got a new FISA court order to once again start surveilling Paul Manafort. And this time it wasn't about Ukraine necessarily. This time it was about Russia and their attack on the presidential election. And this is the part that's going to turn everything upside down in Washington tonight. The surveillance on Paul Manafort under the second FISA court order, quote, continued into early this year, including a period when Paul Manafort was known to talk to President Donald Trump. According to 3 sources familiar with the investigation, some of the intelligence collected includes communications that sparked concerns among the investigators that Manafort had encouraged the Russians to help with the campaign. Now, the sourcing here is important. Again, CNN is describing 3 sources familiar with the investigation as saying when the FBI was listening in on Manafort, what they heard were communications that sparked concerns that Manafort was encouraging the Russians to help with the campaign. But CNN then goes on to qualify it. So they say they've got 3 sources, but then they go on to say that 2 of the 3 sources who say these communications included the possibility that Manafort had encouraged the Russians. 2 of the 3 sources then cautioned that the evidence on that was not conclusive. Okay, so 1 source says it was, 2 sources say it wasn't, but they all agree that there was something about cooperating with the Russians, encouraging the Russians. This period of surveillance on Manafort does include time, we're told, when Manafort was known to be in communication with President Trump, once President Trump was president. According to CNN, quote, "It is unclear whether Trump himself was picked up on the surveillance." So we have known already that Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort was under intense pressure from prosecutors. If this new reporting tonight is correct, we now know quite a bit more about why he was under such intense pressure and how that is being made manifest. It now seems clear from multiple sources, though, including this new reporting tonight, that a lot of what they've got to work with against Paul Manafort, specifically on the Russia issue, is stuff that they need somebody to confess to, necessarily. It's not stuff that they need, witnesses to describe or corroborate. It now sounds like a lot of what they've got about Paul Manafort on the Russia thing is on tape. It's stuff that they captured on intelligence intercepts. Remember, CIA Director John Brennan, if he was correct when he testified to Congress that it was CIA interest that sparked the initial criminal and counterintelligence inquiry into what was going on with Russia and the election and Russia and the Trump campaign, well, the CIA doesn't monitor Americans. They spy on foreigners. So that means that the CIA first picked up on these concerns because they were seeing something in their international surveillance and spying that made them worry about the Trump campaign. Now, since then, we've seen other reporting that allied foreign intelligence agencies, like the British and the Dutch, also heard things on their foreign surveillance, meaning their spies also picked stuff up that was conveyed to U.S. intelligence agencies because they saw something that concerned them about potential contacts between the Trump campaign and the Russian government. Well, now, if this new reporting about FISA court warrants against Manafort is true as well, this would mean that the intelligence and law enforcement monitoring of these concerning contacts between Trump associates and the Russian government, this intelligence surveillance of these communications and contacts and conversations, this would mean that those intercepts were not things that just happened abroad between foreigners. It included surveillance that happened here in the United States because they got a FISA court warrant, because the government was able to convince a federal judge that in this instance it was legit and constitutional to surveil a U.S. person, Paul Manafort, because of the possibility that he was involved in some kind of crime. Which brings us back to the New York Times scoop tonight. We had known before now that the FBI mounted a surprise raid on Paul Manafort's house in Alexandria, Virginia, after midnight on July 26 this summer. Now, there have been a few strange aspects, or at least unexplained aspects of that raid that we've really been puzzling over for a few weeks now since we first learned about the raid on Manafort's house. The biggest, and for me, most perplexing question about that raid is whether it was really necessary. People close to Paul Manafort have raised the prospect that the raid was overreach, or it was at least unnecessary and bullying, because before the FBI got that search warrant and stormed into his house, Mueller's team and the FBI didn't make any demands to Manafort for what they wanted him to hand over. I mean, law enforcement and the FBI have a lot of tools and a lot of power to extract stuff from people who don't want to give them information, right? But there's also a kind of logical chain of escalation that goes along with that. If you want something from a potential witness, you can ask for it. If they say no, then you can subpoena it. Eventually, you can get a search warrant. Once you've got a search warrant, you can execute that search warrant by knocking on the door, or you can execute that search warrant by knocking down the door. I mean, there's a chain of escalation here. With the Manafort raid, it seems like they went right to 11. In the case of the raid on Manafort's house on July 26th, people on the Manafort side of things say that Manafort was never even asked for the documents that the FBI came in and seized by force from his home. He'd never been asked for them before they barged into his house and took them? Why is that? Well, now we know a little bit more about why that may be. ABC News was first to report back in August that when the FBI executed this raid on Manafort's house, Manafort only learned that it was underway when armed FBI agents started knocking on his door. And I don't mean on his front door. He first learned that the FBI raid was underway when agents knocked on his bedroom door. ABC was first to report that back in the first week of August. Here's the question. How did the FBI agents get all the way into his bedroom door? Well, according to the New York Times tonight, we've got an answer. According to the New York Times tonight, FBI agents were given permission to pick the lock on his front door in order to get into his house without knocking. This is the lead from the Times story that just broke tonight. Quote, Paul J. Manafort was in bed early one morning in July when federal agents bearing a search warrant picked the lock on his front door and raided his Virginia home. They took binders stuffed with documents and copied his computer files, looking for evidence that Manafort had set up secret offshore bank accounts. They even photographed the expensive suits in his closet. Later in the story, here's more detail on that. Quote, it is unusual for a prosecutor to seek a search warrant against someone who, like Paul Manafort, had already put his lawyer in contact with the Justice Department. To get the warrant, Robert Mueller's team had to show probable cause to a judge that Manafort's home contained evidence of a crime. Quote, to be allowed to pick the lock and enter the home unannounced, prosecutors further had to persuade a federal judge that Manafort was likely to destroy evidence. If the Times is right in this reporting tonight, why did prosecutors believe, why were prosecutors able to convince a federal judge that Paul Manafort was going to destroy evidence if they knocked on the door, that they couldn't afford to knock on the door? What evidence was Manafort likely to destroy, and how could he destroy it that quickly? In terms of what we know was going on around then, Manafort had testified the previous morning to the Senate Intelligence Committee. He was due to testify the following day to the Judiciary Committee, although that testimony never happened. Why did that FBI raid, including them picking the lock on his front door and showing up in the middle of the night and seizing all the stuff he presumably didn't even know they were looking for, why did that happen between those two planned visits to those two Senate committees? Does it affect our understanding of why the Mueller raid was conducted with such urgency to know, at least to have reported tonight, that Paul Manafort sometime this year was under surveillance by the FBI thanks to a FISA court order? Did he know he was under surveillance? Was the Mueller inquiry worried that Manafort was going to find out he was under surveillance based on how he was going to get questioned in those Senate committee hearings? We still don't know. But apparently, once the raid on Paul Manafort's house was over, any remaining subtlety about what was going on here was foreclosed. Quote, Special Counsel Robert Mueller then followed the house search with a warning. His prosecutors told Mr. Manafort they planned to indict him. There's a lot going on right now. Lots of different kinds of news. And on a night like tonight, a lot of it feels very important. Most urgently, there is another Category 5 hurricane that is slamming into the Caribbean tonight. In the immediate path of the storm are Martinique and Dominica and Guadeloupe and Montserrat and St. Kitts and Nevis, and incredibly, again, the Virgin Islands. As you can see on the map, thereafter, for the first time in more than 80 years, Puerto Rico may take a direct hit from a Category 4 or Category 5 storm. It's expected to get to Puerto Rico as of probably the day after tomorrow. So this is another huge, potentially fatal and very dangerous storm. And again, right now it's a Category 5, and it's about to hit parts of the Caribbean that are already hurting so badly from what just happened with Hurricane Irma. So that is a huge deal and very urgent. Speaking of huge deals and very urgent, but of a totally different kind, in Washington tonight, there is a serious political matter that is about to sort of come up as a surprise that could be very, very serious in terms of U.S. policy. It looks like Republicans are making another concerted effort once again to try to kill Obamacare. Everybody had sort of thought these efforts were dead, but they are making a last press for it. And there's reason to believe that they may be able to get there. We're going to be talking tonight with a Democratic senator who has undergone unusual personal hardship to try to stop that from happening. She's been speaking on the ACA tonight on the Senate floor. We'll be speaking with her momentarily. Tomorrow, the president's personal lawyer and a longtime Trump Organization executive And incidentally, someone with a lot of ties to a lot of money from the former Soviet Union, Michael Cohen, he's going to be testifying to the Senate Intelligence Committee tomorrow. Hillary Clinton's former campaign chair, John Podesta, testified to the Senate Intelligence Committee today. He's the one whose emails were hacked and then stolen and then released back into the U.S. by WikiLeaks, an operation that the intelligence community believes was organized as part of the Russian attack. So all of these stories are a big deal. There's a lot going on, and we're going to get to a lot of that tonight. But again, at Russia o'clock tonight, this huge news that the president's campaign manager has been informed that he will be indicted. And concurrently, this news breaking that the president's campaign manager was the subject of 2 rounds of intensive law enforcement surveillance, both times ordered by the secretive national security FISA court, and that surveillance continued into this year. It may or may not have included Manafort's conversations with the president personally. Crucially, this latest report from CNN tonight makes the point that some of what was overheard on the surveillance of Manafort raised at least the prospect that Manafort had encouraged the Russians to try to help with the presidential campaign. Again, the sourcing on that is disputed, but the suggestion is clearly there. It's a big news night. We've got more on these stories next, including a live interview with one of the New York Times reporters who broke this news. Stay with us.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.